Back to Contemporary Black Voices, and now we're going to do our hot topics. But first, let me, as usual, give compliments and thank you to our producer and our dictator, Kyle Booker.
Yeah, yeah.
He's really been a dictator today. He's been all over. You can't do this. You can't do that. Caleb, take your leg down. But he's great. He's great. So, our comment today comes from Everything is Everything 6328. And Everything is Everything wrote revisionist history from people who were suspiciously missing when flesh and blood was put on the line for civil rights. What he's saying is that these people were not there to help us. But he ends it with this. I'm okay with it up to that point. But he ends it with this. The liberal Jews part was even a bigger insult to us. I'm not sure how Everything is Everything is using that. Is he saying it's an insult that they were a part of what we were doing? Or is he saying that it's an insult that they claim that they were involved? If it's the latter, then let me say that Everything is Everything. Jews were very much involved in the civil rights movement. When those buses were going from the East Coast and the South to integrate, those were young Jewish boys on those buses. The 3 civil rights workers that were murdered in Philadelphia, Mississippi, and I believe it was 1963. 2 of them were Jewish and 1 was black. So it's not an insult to say that the Jewish community was involved in the civil rights movement. But that said, now we'll get to our hot topic.
Okay.
Hot topic. Is public education a pipeline for our boys to prison? Uh-oh. Go ahead, Sharon. You look like you could say something.
You know, going back to the statistics that I read earlier about teaching them while they're in public school, teaching our own while they're in public school, 76% of the teachers and administrators in these schools are white, okay? And even in schools that are predominantly black, you're going to have a high population of white teachers and possibly administrators. And so I know that when I was in the classroom, that I can give that child that look and we would shut everything down. But and it was shut down with respect. But we have an issue here now to where some school districts, they don't hire a lot of teachers within the city or within the community that these kids are growing up in. In some cases, I'm thinking about a school district here in San Antonio. They used to go up to Iowa to hire teachers to bring down to the schools, and those Iowan teachers had no idea of the culture of these kids. And so if a young black boy will look at a white teacher a certain way, there was a high possibility that she felt threatened, and he would end up in the front office, possibly put in school suspension. And so there is a cultural misalignment a lot of times between the teacher and the child that they teach, to where it's very, very easy for a child to end up in prison in the schools. Now, I'm going to say one more thing. As a parent and as a teacher, educator, we have to be aware of how this suspension or this in-school suspension leads up to suspension, and what are the resources that Caleb was asking about earlier to help our kids while they are on suspension. And in some cases, these kids are sent home for 3 days, a week, with no other type of interaction in their schools. And so we have a serious problem. And so, yes, public schools are very, very vulnerable to the school to pipeline system.
I want to respond to you about the statistic you gave, the 7%. That, and they have to go to Iowa to find teachers. Why? Is it that we are not getting enough graduates from college to go into teaching, so they have to find whoever they can to teach? Is that part of the problem?
Well, I heard something the other day from one of my mentees, doctoral mentees. South Carolina, Okay. Now we can suspect that probably there's a high population of black students in South Carolina.
Right.
Well, they couldn't find special ed teachers. You know where they found them? They shipped them from Romania.
Well, that's not the problem
But
with the administration.
what I'm trying to say is that we're not looking within our own pipeline, if you will, for these teachers.
But are they there? Is my question.
They're somewhere. They were able to go overseas and bring in these teachers from Romania, over there by Russia, to come over and teach these kids special education. When there are special education teachers in the United States looking for jobs, why are we going overseas to bring in
Let me
Romanian
understand
special ed
exactly
teachers?
What you said.
I know what I'm saying.
I said I want to understand. I know
Okay.
you understand. I'm trying to catch up with you.
Okay.
Uh-oh.
There's special education teachers that are black
Mm-hmm.
that are available, but they're going all the way to Romania, knowing that these special education black teachers are here and choosing this Romanian over these black special education teachers.
So I read somewhere that there are some superintendents, okay, who have already mentioned that they only want so many black teachers in their system. So there's already racism at the administrative level as to who goes into those classrooms, whether it's general education classrooms or special education classrooms. So that is a problem. That is a subject that really needs to be discussed even deeper, is the racism in hiring.
Well, if that's true, you're right. And I guess you stick by that.
I stick by it.
Okay,
Well, I mean, I think we facing the same problem. It's who we want educating our kids. And so if you flip that on his head, you can clearly see, do you think they would want one of us educating their kids? Do you think they would want one of us in a position of authority in the classroom, or even we know the dynamics between a child and their teacher? Would they want one of their kids developing that kind of bond or affinity toward the black teacher? So I could definitely see them questioning who they want in those classrooms. And so,
Well,
but the example you're giving is a little different.
Mm-hmm.
You're saying this is a white school with white students, and they don't want to hire a black to teach their kids.
You're already having principals
Now,
getting fired. You're already having.
Wait, let me
Okay.
clear this out. I'm not talking about a white school. I'm talking about a black-dominated school. Let's take Sam Houston, okay? And there are black special education teachers out there, and they're gonna go to Romania. If that indeed is what's happening, that certainly needs to be looked into. Yeah, I think so.
but we don't. But see, we don't know we don't know the statistics. We don't know the dynamics of the school that was in South Carolina. It might have been 50%.
But we know one problem. We're only 7% of the teachers.
Right, and that is an issue.
That's an issue, but I think we gotta look in-house. We understand what you're saying, and we know there are races out there for sure. But we gotta look in-house.
Well, you know,
why are we not getting more of our kids educated to be teachers?
Well, one of the problems. Yeah, that's it.
That's
That's
the
the big
number
thing.
No, I disagree. I'm saying from Jump Street,
You're talking about from in-house. We're talking about
in our community.
We're talking about from the beauty shop to the barber shop. They're not paying them enough money to go in the classroom and deal with Pookie. Now, I've heard that from us.
Okay, so what you're saying is they're out there, but they're not getting paid enough, so they're doing something else?
I'm saying, first of all, there are people who can do special ed. There are people who can be teachers, and they have went to school to become that.
Right.
But once they find out that they don't make enough money to pay their student loans, then they get out of the teaching profession very early and go to another profession. I don't understand why we as a panel cannot see that our community and what we are being faced with is there's a war going on that
Yes,
we're
yes.
being a spectator to.
Why do you say that this panel can't understand that?
Because
I find that offensive.
we're good.
We understand it. We understand it.
Good. Do something about it.
I think you all do, don't you? We're up here discussing it. We're up here discussing it. Don't jump on us.
But there is an issue. There is an issue. Again, our kids, I hate to say it, are at risk when they go into these schools and there's no representation of teachers or administrators that look like them, to where they are at risk of getting disciplined more. They are at risk.
So why do we continue to do it when we're spending every Sunday all this money in churches, and when those churches try to set up a school, the school then fails for whatever reason? We've got a cycle that we can't get out of. We're sending these kids to a hostile environment. We know we're sending them to a hostile environment. We're talking about it's a pipeline between education and prison, but we as black
Gotta
folks
take
have not
ownership.
been able to take ownership and be able to do something about it. All we're doing is saying that the public schools, everybody else is not doing anything about it. But what the hell are we doing?
Well, I mean, let me ask you, what was the issue when Matina founded the Young Men's Leadership Academy?
Dr.
So-
Diop?
Yes. So what was the issue with that?
That
If anybody
I don't know,
recalls?
but when Antioch was trying to form their all male school, I don't think that's working anymore. I don't think, and I don't know that as a fact, but I don't see that as being a prominent place. And if it is, why aren't more of our kids, even if it's boys, aren't they going to that particular school? We've got to make it attractive. We've got to make it so that maybe we are back in the churches. If you don't, maybe aren't a member of the church. I'm not saying that this should be this way, but that's how you get into the school, is being a member of the church. And maybe you don't necessarily pay tuition to go there, but you're paying the tuition by being whatever you do with the church. You're participating and volunteering. You're doing all other kind of stuff. We just have to figure it out, folks.
Well, we have success stories. In Harlem, the guy who started the school in Harlem, at the boys' school, and then in Chicago
And then the
also.
brother in Florida, right? That we had on the
Yes.
we had on the show.
Atlanta.
Was he in Atlanta?
Atlanta.
Okay, the brother in Atlanta. His school seems to be another success story.
But those are private schools.
Right.
His is a private school.
Right.
Okay. And those kids are excelling. Those kids are really excelling.
Right.
I'm talking about what we do for our kids. The one that you talked about to the lady, that the mother doesn't care.
Right.
There's no father present,
Right.
whatever. But they have the potential, but there's nobody who's looking at them to see if they have the potential. So we send them to that public school where it becomes what you say, the pipeline from education to prison.
All I can say is this, from my own experience working in an inner city school, is that that campus administrator needs to take a risk on allowing the teachers to do what they need to do. Because you have a lot of good teachers in these schools, but if the administrator is held back on, no, you can't do this because we got to do this, then it kind of hinders what a teacher who really has the heart to want to do in those classrooms. And again, I was blessed for my beginning years of teaching to where I had administrators who allowed me to do, as we say, do me, to help those kids to do what they needed to do.
Let me ask you another question. Is our black males who are teachers, who then become a part of the administration, is that becoming a problem as well? And is the white school system taking that black male, taking them out of the classroom, giving them more money, saying, we're going to pay you more money, but they put you in the administration. Once they put you in the administration, then of course the administration is administering them, and they can't do what they need to do for our kids. Is that an issue?
I can't answer that question.
I think it is.
I mean, one thing I know. So I know being an educator, it's a calling. You have to have a passion for it. That's one of the biggest issues.
But also, I keep going back. A teacher is only as effective as the parents involved.
Okay, come on now.
When I was a kid, I wouldn't fight. One of the reasons I was scared, but
Right.
the other reason is if I got kicked out of school, I had another
Right.
kick you
Right.
out.
But
Right.
couldn't come up-
Some of the brothers that were going to school with me, they get kicked out, they go home, lay up and watch TV,
Right.
do everything,
Right.
nothing happens.
Right.
You know what? I understand what you're saying, but I've seen plenty of circumstances where people come from a challenging home environment, but they still go on to excel. And so,
Caleb, we could pick out those.
No,
yeah,
I
but
mean,
you
I
can't
see it.
make that the general. You could
I
pick
see
out
it a
those.
lot. I see it a
David
lot.
Floyd was one. I wrote his.
Right. I remember Dave.
David Floyd came from a terrible environment, and the kid ended up getting a PhD. But for every David Floyd, there's 100 out there that are not David.
Agreed.
Oh, I mean, like I said, I see a lot of success stories coming from households that are challenged.
Let me give you this one. We all know Mateen Diop.
Yeah.
He was principal at Sam Houston. He said a parent came up there to whip a student's butt who had whipped her student, her child. Imagine that. I mean, just imagine that. That mentality is out there. And I think our bigger problem is how do we deal with that?
I think that everybody that's on this panel would agree that education is paramount. However, we have to understand that as it relates to voting, as it relates to intellect, as it relates to everything, has to start with the education. And when you talk about not having that parent involved and that parent not being involved, that's where it all starts and where, to me, the problem starts from. And we have to address that and to figure out how to get that to a point to where we can take hold of that.
And I don't think anyone has an answer.
No, I mean, do you think the districts need to, form some kind of partnership with the HBCUs? Would they even be allowed to in this environment form some kind of partnership with like HBCU colleges?
There's a lot of unknowns now.
Yeah. So I mean,
In terms of what? I don't.
as far as developing and fostering future talent, as far as recruitment of teachers, encouraging maybe the districts need to maybe get involved as far as future staffing, maybe even offer teachers scholarships to encourage people to go into the teacher profession. You know, I mean, there are probably some solutions out there, but would they be allowed?
I still think one of the major problems is in the homes. And I don't know how, in our system, there's nothing you can do about that. Think of a young kid. I tried to give an example when our guest was here. He goes home, his mother's strung out. She has at least 5 men in and out that night, and he's hearing everything going on in the bedroom. Then he has no breakfast, he has to come to school. Sharon, how does a teacher deal with that student?
Well, if it was my child, if it was my student,
Mhm.
first of all, go get them something to eat.
Right.
You know, feed them. And then, yes, I have done this. I let that child take about a 15 to 20 minute power nap. That 15 to 20 minute power nap at the beginning of the day got me more from this kid than trying to force this child into doing whatever he or she needed to do. You know, I wanted him to do academically. So again, teachers and administrators are going to have to take the risk needed to do what they need to do to help these kids. And oftentimes it's clouded into policy.
Okay, closing remarks. Mr. Chris,
I'm going to talk about the education and say,
stop insulting me.
okay, I'm going to say, you know, I like it when I insult you. I'm going to say that, yes, we do have a solution. When Black America is probably, what was it, the 7th or 8th economic force on earth, next to Mexico and Spain, we have to tell our churches or some type of organization, whoever it might be, and I know most people are against the Nation of Islam, but we've got to tell somebody, we need to pay those people who are teachers more and pay them to work with our kids. That's my final comment.
Mr. Caleb.
No, I just want to point out what Dr. Chadwell had said and what our guest earlier had said, and Dr. Chadwell gave an example of giving kids a nap. Our guest earlier had gave an example where she offered to pay for pizza out of her own pocket. She took it on her own to come up with, even though she was teaching math, she took it on her own to expand that to teach history, Black history. And so that, I just want to point out, that's the importance of having teachers that look like you in the classroom, the importance of having teachers that care about the kids in the classroom. And that's the most, I think that's the most important thing. I think if you have a teacher that really cares about you, that you can relate to, I've seen a lot of kids that overcome their circumstances because of a good teacher that cared.
Okay. Dr. Shadwell.
Well, today's conversation was something near and dear to my heart, especially having been in public education, especially seeing the the discussions about the achievement gap between Black and white students in particular, and what we can do as Black parents to navigate this system to where we do something to improve the betterment of our kids' education.
Okay. Okay. Well, in closing, I think we all have a responsibility, and I agree with Chris that we have to get more involved. We have to do something, and hopefully we are doing something right here at Contemporary Black Voices, and we'll continue to do it. And we'll see you next week with another fantastic panelist and subject. In the meantime, remember, we're telling our story our way.